canceling the in-person Republican convention in Jacksonville, Florida, over safety concerns as the situation in that state deteriorates. It comes as the CDC releases guidelines for reopening schools, emphasizing getting kids back into the classrooms. Ahead, I'll speak with the president of one of our country's largest teachers unions about these guidelines. But first, right now, millions of Americans are facing an uncertain economic future as a surprising Republican intra-party fight is delaying another round of COVID relief. The $600 a week unemployment benefits, critical to about 20 million recipients right now, are about to expire. And the stakes are equally high for nearly 30 million Americans as the 4-month pause on evictions in the U.S. is also set to expire. It's raising anxiety all around the country. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, for example, 40% of the population rents. And in Kentucky, it's not just residents, even local governments are running up.
Did you hear what she said? In Tulsa, Oklahoma, 40% of the population rents. That's one reason why that they have such strong rental policies in the state of Oklahoma, is because there are so many people in the state of Oklahoma that rents. This particular town that she's talking about here, let me back up, we're in Kentucky right there. This particular town that they're talking about right here is in Tulsa. Tulsa is where the Oral Robertson ministry is. I worked in Tulsa for a little while, and then I worked in Sand Springs, which is just right down the road from Tulsa, give or take about 10 miles. Worked there for, I guess, right at 2 months before I left and went back to my niece's cousin's house in Missouri, and then I come back through lower part of Illinois through Kentucky and stayed 3 days in land between the lakes, and then went to Memphis and got roughed up 3 different occasions, and then went on down to Atlanta that same year. And sure enough, got roughed up down in Atlanta whenever I got down there because of the watch that was on me. But I've been to Tulsa. Tulsa is basically all related around oil. They do have a little bit of farming up in that area, but it ain't nothing like out here. And of course, whenever the oil market goes down in your oil producing states, so does your income. And now they've been hit by all this, and it's going to be devastating in what they're fixing to have to face off on within the next month or two, which is all going to basically hit right into the wrong area right about fall coming into winter. And whenever this occurs, you're looking at a major catastrophe. If you'll listen to the analogy that the next person's fixing to talk about over in Kentucky, he talks about the flood pertaining to the levees, part of the levees that broke whenever the Mississippi River and the Ohio River got real high. But he also uses the same type of analogy of a flood of people that basically are going to be at their wits' end towards people living from paycheck to paycheck right up the road here in Paducah, Kentucky. So please listen to this. It's extremely sad, and the professional people should open up their eyes to be able to be alerted to these abstractions that's fixing to fall upon the humanity because of everything being mishandled. And I know the coronavirus is going to be the number one topic that's going to get the blame for this, but the blame should fall up onto the feet of the people because of the lifestyles that they was living went beyond anything that God found to be acceptable. And because of it, yes, something horrible has happened. Now, it's up to us to figure out what was that horrible happening that happened and try to correct it. But please listen.
In Tulsa, Oklahoma, for example, 40% of the population rents. And in Kentucky, it's not just residents. Even local governments are running out of money as coronavirus cases rise. Our reporters are on the ground in those two states. NBC's Cal Perry is in Paducah, Kentucky for us. MSNBC's David Gura is in Tulsa, Oklahoma at a courthouse that is holding eviction.
Keep in mind, whenever Paducah, Kentucky done what they done to me in 2008, in regards towards trying to entrap me of me being a homegrown terrorist simply because I had made mention that there was going to be electrical disturbances to come. I didn't say how that these electrical disturbances was going to come. And of course in 2009, it may have been 2007 whenever that occurred in my life towards the Paducah. I got it all on record. It's all on file. But it costed me about $180 to get my truck out of pound. It costed me in 2009 whenever they captivated me and tried to hold me hostage because I was relating around the facts that the Bible predicts of the death of Satan, the fleshly Satan, and because that I had made mention that I had been selected by God in these regards. They wanted to punish me by giving me a Class E felon. Well, instead of them giving me a Class E felon, I went ahead with what these bozos wanted me to do, which was go and be mentally checked out. So I went and got mentally checked out, and whenever I come back, everything was fine and hunky-dory. Matter of fact, the judge actually bragged on me in Paducah, Kentucky about what kind of a good candidate or inmate that I was. He really couldn't call me an inmate because I really hadn't been charged and I wasn't really going through a charge. All I was doing was going through an evaluation. It took approximately 6 months by going up to MCC in downtown Chicago, visiting with Dr. Dana. But somebody paid for that. They paid for me to go get checked out, get on an airplane ride, and fly all the way to the smaller airport out of Chicago, get on a bus, and go from a bus ride to be studied, and then get brought all the way back. Somebody paid for that. You know who paid for it? Taxpayers. You know who paid for the third get up? Whenever they went all the way out to Oklahoma, City, Oklahoma, and incarcerated me, and then drugged me back to Trigg County in front of Judge Woodall because of some phony fake charges that had been placed upon my life pertaining to stalking, simply because I'd made 2 telephone calls. You know who paid for that? The taxpayers of the state of Kentucky paid for that. They not only had to pay for somebody, a driver, to go all the way out to Oklahoma to pick me up, but then they had to pay to house me for 9.5 months, in which during the time that they was housing me, they sent me to LaGrange, Kentucky, of being psychoanalyzed again. They wasn't satisfied in the first psychoanalyzing up in downtown Chicago on a federal scale. Now they had to go down a notch towards taking it in a state scenario scale. LaGrange, Kentucky. And of course that's where the doctors basically poisoned me, put me on Risperdal, and I had to plead guilty to a charge that I never should have had to plead guilty to, because they had me in between a hard place and a rock. I couldn't make a $25,000 bond because in the state of Kentucky, bondsmen are illegal. You cannot hire a bondsman in the state of Kentucky. And if you don't have 25 grand in your checking account, or if you don't have property in Kentucky that's valued at 25 grand, you're basically stuck in between a hard place and a rock. So because of their undoings of how that they handle not just my case, but thousands of other cases similar to mine, the state of Kentucky is about to fall. They're in the same scenario type situation that Tulsa, Oklahoma, and other parts of the country is. So this is a tsunami that, if you listen to this guy, the way that he expresses it, that it's on its way coming near a neighborhood near you. And we don't have no one to blame but ourselves towards what has occurred here. Please listen. It's so sad. Please listen.
Hearings. Good to see both of you guys. Cal, there you are, Mitch McConnell's home state. Paducah, as I understand it, has one of the higher infection rates in that state. What are folks telling you there that they need from Congress in this next round of relief?
Well, they say that that first round of relief was very helpful, very necessary, required, and they want that second round to come sooner rather than later. They are worried about a gap. And look, this is a layered problem, from the schools to the individual to the small businesses to, as you said, these small cities. This is a town of 25,000 people in Western Kentucky. Very difficult to balance the budget when so much of your revenue just disappears as a small city. We had a chance to speak to the mayor, who talked about the need for long-term planning coming out of this crisis. Take a listen.
I would like, as a city government, to be able to think about what's going to happen after COVID. I would like to be preparing for some of those big projects that we need here to stimulate our economy. I would like to see some of those funds flow more easily to small rural towns like ours. We have to fight for those dollars here. We don't just naturally get them. We're not a big metropolitan.
Now, Infrastructure Week has continued to prove elusive for the country, frankly. And when you look at some of those other facets, small businesses, we've heard a lot about that indemnification process, that protecting yourself from any lawsuits. People want that to be a part of the bill. And the schools, more funding for the schools as people get back, especially in a part of the country like this, Chris, where you know a lot of people are going to be remote learning. We're talking about high-speed internet and getting equipment to kids who may not otherwise have it, Chris.
All right, Cal. David, let's talk about Oklahoma, which has been trying to keep up with a sea of unemployment claims. Now, add in this potential eviction crisis. Tell me what's going on where you are. I can't imagine many more depressing places than being at hearings for evictions.
You know, thousands of people in this community, Chris, are on an...
Before they start talking about the eviction notices there in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, they went back. Now we're back in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is basically in the area where I was staying at or renting from. Whenever I rented a 3-bedroom house there in downtown Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, at the time I was making about $2,000 a week doing auto body work, and I rented out a 3-bedroom house that had a fenced-in backyard. Had a garage, 2-car garage with a pool table. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to look at the records to verify, but I'm pretty sure I made the agreement of renting out this property for $750 a month from Mr. Jackson, that is still living in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I had just been out a month before, a month during, and a month after. You got to come up with 3 months rent in the state of Oklahoma, because they got such of a rental problem in Oklahoma. Congress got in behind the Renters Association and backed them up towards making these demands. And the only way that I am aware that you can rent out a piece of property in Oklahoma is you got to come up with 3 months rent before you can ever get into that piece of property. I shelled out, give or take, around $2,300. 714 and another 7. $2,300, something like that. I was in the process of moving. I had already slept in the the rental property for about a week was whenever the people in Kentucky decided that they was going to come after me over 2 bogus telephone calls, that they was going to try to put 1 to 5 years on each call, even though both telephone calls was non-threatening and both telephone calls was in apologetic form. I had not violated any order or probation mandated order of not making contact with these people after those occurrences took place, because I was only placed on a 2-year agreement of not bothering or talking or leaving any messages with the LBL authorities. That 2-year period was for 2 years. It wasn't for 3 years, it wasn't for 5 years, it wasn't an indefinite order, it was only for 2 years. I followed the order right to the T, right down to 2 years. And then contacted them again about how that my story was going to be told to the American people. Because I had made mention that my story was going to be told, it really got under somebody's saddle. A burr got under somebody's saddle. And of course, whenever I made the second telephone call to Mr. Gary Hawkins himself, that worked for Land Between the Lakes of the Agriculture Forestry Division, that was whenever Gary Hawkins and his wife Lisa Hawkins, independently being mentored by Dwayne Camry and the people there in Land Between the Lakes, put out false fake charges that I had threatened them to this and I had threatened them to that and I was going to do this, and they was so scared that they already had an escape plan towards where that they was going to go and what that they was going to do if I showed up at their house, and had no idea where they lived. Because once more, I was a visitor up in the state of Kentucky to begin with. I didn't live up there. I'd spent a lot of time in the woods up there, living like Jeremiah Johnson, but I had no earthly idea. I didn't even hardly know where Trigg County was from Marshall County, much less Livingston County, and all those other different counties in western Kentucky. But they put up basic lies, total lies, in lying about that I had threatened them in some sort of way, or that they felt threatened in some sort of way because of my behavior. Once more, they drove all the way out to Oklahoma to pick me up and to drag me back. And I spent 9.5 months just like a hardcore criminal. Even after that they had already put out an order of Four Rivers Behavior Center in 2007, even after that they had put out an order for a 6-month evaluation in downtown Chicago by Dr. Dana. Now this makes the third get up. They was not going to be satisfied until they poisoned me and ruined me. And that's exactly what they done. They got a doctor in LaGrange, Kentucky, working with Judge Woodall in Trigg County to mandate an order for me to take Risperdal that caused obesity and breast enhancement up onto my body. And they wonder how come they're fixing to go broke. And they wonder how come the people in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma is fixing to go broke. And they wonder how come retribution has fell upon to this nation, towards this nation going broke. Once more, my representative that was representing me, public defender, come back to my cell while I was being held there in Trigg County, Cadiz, Kentucky, and said, Mr. Jackson, they want you to be evaluated again because they're thinking that there's something wrong with you. I go, why? Because I made a telephone call? I go, I was working making $2,000 a week. Whenever they come and nab me up, I had Bondo dust on me from head to toe. I just got through putting on a door skin on a Ford truck. Why do they think there's something wrong with me? Well, I don't know, but they're thinking that they're wanting you to volunteer for another evaluation. I said, well, I'm not going to do it, and as far as I'm concerned, this is double jeopardy. Because I ain't done nothing wrong. I haven't violated no order. And it was so detrimental in my public defender's life that she actually quit because of that. It took her about 6 months to a year before she finally found a position where she could get away from doing that job there in Trigg County towards being a public defender. But she eventually quit because she realized how bogus and how unjust that the system up there was responding and reacting. And I'm pretty sure if she opened up her eyes to my case, she probably seen other cases that was probably pretty similar towards people being strong-armed. But they ordered me to go get another psychiatric evaluation done in LaGrange, Kentucky, and while I was up there being studied, that's whenever they put me on a Risperdal. And it's a good thing that I did halt any type of volunteerance, because if I would have volunteered to have gone to LaGrange, Kentucky to be psychoanalyzed, they would have charged me for it, and I would have wound up having a big bill. That's how they act. That's how they do things up in the Commonwealth state of Kentucky. In addition to not allowing for bondsmen to work in that state. Now, how bogus is that? Pertaining to people being charged for stuff that they never should have been charged for, pertaining to fighting your case outside the jail. So whatever befalls upon the state of Kentucky, whatever befalls upon the state of Oklahoma, whatever befalls upon all these other states that has acted so illegitimate whenever it comes to attacking God's elect, as far as I'm concerned, they got it coming to them. Like I said, I'm very familiar with the rental policies in the state of Oklahoma because I'd rented out a piece of property up there. And in less than 10 days, I was nabbed up. I lost all my money, lost my furniture, lost my savings deposit, had my lights turned on my name. I mean, I was good to go as a citizen of Oklahoma. It was just a matter of time before I was going to go down there and transfer all my automobile records and get an Oklahoma plate and put on my truck. I was that close. I was probably within a week of transferring all my records in becoming a citizen of the state of Oklahoma. But I was nabbed up. In the meantime, I got a truck sitting in Oklahoma. I got an enclosed trailer sitting in Oklahoma, and about $20,000 to $30,000 worth of tools sitting in Oklahoma. If I had not made an agreement with a guy by the name of Billy Rose that lives in Shawnee, Oklahoma, towards him nabbing up all my tools, my truck, my trailer, and getting all my stuff out of there, if I did not make an agreement with him towards him doing what he done, I would have lost every cent of everything that I had. Everything. And to this day, I'm still indebted to this individual because of what he done. I'm indebted to him. And will remain indebted to him for the rest of my life, him and his wife. Because if he didn't do what he done, I would have lost my truck, my trailer, my tools, and all my records.
You know, thousands of people in this community, Chris, are on an economic precipice, and the longer that I stay here, the better sense I have of how high that precipice is. Yesterday, I was talking with people, hundreds of people, who were in line trying to get unemployment benefits. Many of them have been out of work since March, and there have been problems with the state's computer systems. There have been problems with the state being able to deal with the demand for those benefits. And now we're here on the eve of this moratorium expiring. Tulsa is a city, Chris, that has had an eviction crisis for a long time. On average, before COVID-19, 14,000 households are evicted every year in this community. There are 32,000 properties here that have been protected by the CARES Act. That protection due to expire tomorrow. I'm joined by Jeff Janes now. He's the head of Restore Hope Ministries, a group that works with tenants who are having difficulties facing eviction. And Reverend Janes, let me ask you first of all just about the magnitude of this crisis. How bad is this? How bad is what people here are facing?
We had a flood before COVID-19. We're facing a tsunami now, especially with the moratoriums expiring. The numbers of people who could potentially be at the homeless shelters just down the street from us right now, it's just unbelievable. And so we want to keep people out of those shelters. We want to help the landlords too. We know that landlords are hurting as well. We know that tenants are suffering and potentially are facing homelessness when the safest place they could be right now is at home. And so
this court will start to get busy on Monday.
Absolutely.
Landlords will be filing their paperwork, and then come August 24th, 30 days from this weekend.
That's right.
Things are really going to change. What recourse do Tulsans have when this happens, and how big is the disparity in that courtroom between the landlords and tenants?
Well, there are going to be thousands of cases. As you mentioned, on a normal year, we have 14,000 cases. And we know that there are several landlords who have been needing to or wanting to file eviction, but just couldn't because of the moratorium. So without some sort of legislative help, the numbers in that room are going to be high, which is also a health problem for the court workers and everybody in that room. Unfortunately, a lot of tenants are so afraid of losing their housing, they don't come to their court hearing. And even when they do, the disparity of representation is huge. And so we want people to go to their hearings. We want people to ask for help. The thing that I can express to tenants is call for help. Ask for help. In Tulsa and Oklahoma, we have 211. We want people to call for help. There are original resources out there to help them, but the tsunami is coming if we don't do something to stop it.
People in this community talk about the strength of nonprofits, of religious groups like yours, of private philanthropy that's helping with this issue. I spoke to the head of the Housing Authority yesterday, and she said, this is a crisis we can't spend our way out of. She said she's grateful for your help and the help of others, but serious policy changes need to be made. What is your sense of the appetite for that here, and how what's happening here is going to accelerate those efforts?
You know, we're really honored to be a part of helping people. We've been helping people for over 25 years with rent assistance. But what I describe as what we're doing is sandbagging houses in a flood, and what we need is a levee. And one group of agencies doesn't build a levee. A community builds a levee. An organization, a family builds, we come together to build these systems to protect those in need. There are people who are about to be faced with a flood. We need to stop that flood. And so we're happy to be a part of it. We want to help those people, but we do need those systemic changes to make the real difference.
Reverend James, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it. And
Thank you.
Chris, I will say a big effort here is just getting people to know about the resources that are available to help them when they enter these circumstances. I spoke with a lawyer yesterday. He says when he comes to court, he wears a sign, literally wears a sign around his neck, saying that he's a lawyer in the public interest, willing to help tenants who are in trouble. Just highlighting once again the disparity here. Most landlords come to court with attorneys. Most tenants in this community do not. Chris?
And I want to emphasize upon the empathy and the sympathy that I have towards the innocent lives that are going to be affected by all this, regardless whether it be in the state of Oklahoma or in the state of Kentucky or in any other place. The only reason why that I touched off on certain issues was because I'm familiar with the people in Tulsa. I'm familiar with the people in Sand Springs. I'm familiar with the people in Edmond. I'm familiar with the people in Norman. I'm familiar with the people there in downtown Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I got familiar with these people. And because I got familiar with the people, I got familiar with some of their laws. Especially whenever you're going to become a tenant yourself towards living there and making a decent living there. What knocked it in the head is what went on in Kentucky in my personal life. Now, do I wish for horrible, horrible things to happen to innocent people's lives? either in Oklahoma, Kentucky, or anywhere else in the United States or in the world? Absolutely not. I never have wished for any type of hardship to fall up into people's lives. But it's the fact that these politicians that have been running things have run things incorrectly to the point of running them into the ground already, and basically the coronavirus is just going to be the cherry on top that's going to basically finish us off. In other words, that the coronavirus is what's bringing transparency or exposure to what has been going on all along, and now instead of it trickling in, now there's going to be a floodgate that yes, somebody's going to have to deal with this on a professional public level. It would be the same thing if Hurricane Katrina hit again down in Louisiana and flooded out the Ninth Ward again. You're going to have a place to be able to house and put people. What they done during the flood of FEMA was transfer people all over this nation and drop them off and say, good luck. And that's one of the things since 2005 that has contributed to all this stagnation of all this homelessness, plus all these drugs towards people working in the black market and the underground market, is because when you drop off 4 or 5 busloads over here in this town, you drop off 4 or 5 busloads over here in this town, you drop off 20 or 30 busloads over here in this city, you drop off another 20 or 30 busloads over there in that city, you're going to have problems. You're going to have problems. And now the cancer that originated in some of these stagnant areas has now diverted and went all over the nation, just like a disease, just like a cancer. And now, instead of just New Orleans having the cancer of being drug induced and a bunch of people being lazy that won't work, that thinks the government owes them a living, and having a bunch of people that has violent intensity behaviors, now instead of it just being in one particular area, now it's all over the countryside. And you know, I was talking to my cousin or my niece last night out in California, and we was discussing some of the policies that went on during Ronald Reagan's administration about the time that he got shot with Hinckley. It must have come up about Hinckley being put into some sort of a mental institution or a mental ward rather than him going to jail the rest of his life, actually being put into some sort of a hospital. And I told my niece out in California, I go, yeah, that's exactly what's happened to the majority of all these jails, regardless whether it's local jails, state jails, or federal jails. I go, matter of fact, most of your federal jails are still run halfway decent to some extent, but your county jails and your state jails, all they are is mental institutions, because the majority of people that's in there are crazy. They've been on drugs real bad, they're tweaking, they're picking at their bodies, they're picking sores, they don't sleep good at night, they're agitating and aggravating each other. They'll crap in each other's bed. They try to rape people and beat them up if they don't cooperate. I go, the only difference is in these jails, they don't have proper people to watch after people that's got these mental disorders, to where whenever Ronald Reagan decided to let them all out, if they didn't have violent intentions, it basically put them out on the streets, and it caused the cancer, the eroding disease, to go from in-house now out on the streets. So once more, we have failure after failure after failure, administration after administration after administration, that has put us where we are right now in today's society. We have the Reagans, we have the Bushes to thank for pertaining to this type of tragedy that has befallen upon to the American streets, upon to the American people. It's kind of like plucking that hen plucking that chicken. If you pluck that chicken one feather at a time, don't nobody notice. And that's what was going on. That hen was being plucked. It's the same thing as the frog in the water theory, that if the water goes up real gradually, even the frog himself won't realize that he's in danger until it's too late and he's in danger. That's where we're at, folks. This coronavirus is going to bring this to a head. And we're going to see a lot of sadness this fall, such as we've never seen before in various areas, regardless whether it be metropolitan areas or in low-lying areas. I mean, just like they was talking about up there in Paducah, that if they're going to do digitally teaching, you got so many up there in that area that can't even afford their own laptop. Or a majority of them can't even afford a smartphone technology to have in the house. You know what a lot of the kids does? There'll be 1, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 kids in a 40 or 50 class that has enough money that their parents can allow for them to have smartphone technology. Unlimited text, unlimited this, unlimited that. There'll be 10 or 12 or 15 kids that'll pile onto that one kid that's got that phone. And they'll use that one person's phone, regardless whether it's information inputting or outputting. And the kids have learned to divert like that because their parents don't have money. They're not going to be able to buy, they're not going to be able to put them on the same plan towards paying extra $50, $60, $70 for a phone. So the kids have to divert in other areas just to be able to have their own resources. That's what they're talking about up in Paducah whenever it comes to the schools. If you're going to do digital learning, you're going to have to provide computers, software, smartphones. You're going to have to provide the tools for a lot of these parents to be able to stay home and do digital learning. Because the majority of them are like the bunch over here in Oklahoma that's just at the verge of fixing to be kicked out. The only difference is their renters' laws are different in Paducah or in Kentucky than they are in Oklahoma. I guess Oklahoma's probably one of the stiffest renter laws that they are. And the very guy that I rented from, that I lost all that money, about $2,500, on account of what happened up in Kentucky in my life, we're still friends. I've contacted him and talked to him several different times about what went on. And his reply was, well, Dennis, I'm sorry, I'm a businessman, and I'm not going to refund you any of that money back, even though you was arrested and hauled off from Oklahoma back to Kentucky. And of course, I'm in a no-win-win situation with what went on in my life up in Kentucky, to the point the only thing that I can tell that person that I was renting from is I understand. Because I'm sure he's got bills too, because he did. He had other businesses. He had other adventures other than renting out a few property houses. But he explained to me very, very carefully before he ever rented that property out to me about how the renters' policies had changed in Oklahoma due to so many people being taken advantage of. And I guess maybe he was one of them back years ago that got taken advantage of. And everybody got together and went to the courthouse and got something done about it. So the poor people in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I'm pretty sure if 40% of them are renters, they're looking at a major calamity that's fixing to happen, not just in Tulsa, but the whole state of Oklahoma. That whenever you have renters that are cold and callous and they got to pay bills too, you have a domino effect that one event is going to affect another event, and it's going to turn into a cascade. It's going to it'll be a calamity. And you got the facts of us fixing to leave summer, fixing to go over into fall. with the fact that it's being an election year. You still got the coronavirus that's running rapid. You have a recipe, a formula of a perfect storm of disaster. We think that we've seen some uprisings going on right now in Portland, Oregon, Albuquerque, Chicago, New York, Atlanta. This is just the beginning phases of all this, folks. I hate to be the bad news bearer, but this is just the beginning phases of all this. Unless we scratch our heads and figure out something very, very quickly, as people are getting cold and freezing to death and starving to death and getting sick, we got a problem. We can't even bury all our dead. We can't even have a proper funeral for the majority of these people that are dying. People that are dying can't even hold their loved ones' hands while they're dying.
It's a good chance for us to all express how grateful we are to the individuals and organizations that are out there to help. Thank you, David Gurrick. Hal Perry, thanks to you as well. Meanwhile, in Washington, as literally millions of Americans are waiting and time is running out, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell now says Republicans will release their draft of the COVID relief bill next week. NBC's Leanne Caldwell is following the latest from Capitol Hill. Leanne, take us through the latest. What are they still hammering out? How long is this going to take?
Good question, Chris. It was not a good week for Republicans. It wasn't a good week for Republican leader McConnell, where he has really struggled to gain consensus among his diverse Republican conference. And he's also been trying to do that while he's been negotiating with the administration. And there's several sticking points. One of them is the price tag. He wants to spend $1 trillion. There's some in his conference who say, no way, there should be no more money spent on this until there's an audit, perhaps, of the last aid bill. The biggest sticking point, though, is this unemployment insurance, this cliff. People are going to start to lose these additional $600 benefit this weekend, perhaps. And no Republican wants to extend that benefit, but what they can't agree on is what to do. There's some talk about giving a percentage of people's income, but that's also very complicated as well, and they haven't reached consensus on that. As far as timing is concerned, McConnell says that he hopes to unveil the bill early next week. You were supposed to see text of legislation yesterday, and that had even slipped. We expected at first to see it earlier in the week. Meanwhile, Democrats are sitting on the sidelines. We just heard we got a statement from Democratic leader Schumer and Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And what they say is, quote, we had expected to be working throughout this weekend to find common ground on the next COVID response package. It is simply unacceptable that Republicans have had this entire time to reach consensus among themselves and continue to flail. They go on to say time is of the essence and lives are being lost. So they did, Chris, waste a very critical week when they're rushing up against these very important deadlines.
Yeah, critical time to say the least. Leanne Caldwell, thank you for that. I want to turn now to New York Congressman Tom Reed. He is a Republican and co-chair.
But once more, whenever you got people that are rich to begin with, that have run for these public offices, and when you have people that have become rich by being in public office, they do not feel the magnitude or the urgency of what is going on here. All right, let's go back to Tulsa, Oklahoma for a second. They're saying that their average is 40% people that renters. Just plain out and out renters. If you'll combine that with the people that's making mortgage payments, which is probably another third, that's putting you at about 65 to 75% of the people in the state of Oklahoma are going to get in trouble financially between now and fall because the funds are limited or just aren't there. You got 75% of the state that is looking towards a disaster in the state of Oklahoma. And I'm pretty sure that if you'll do the numbers game in other states, regardless whether it be the state of Kentucky, the state of Utah, the state of Nevada, the state of New York, the state of this, the state of that, you'll come up with similar type numbers, formulas that are going to be resonating in similar type ways of people that are either renters or people that are making mortgage payments that's not going to be able to make that mortgage payment. So by these people that are dragging their feet, not understanding the severity of all this, just proves my point that these people are not in check with reality the way that reality needs to be in check with. Whenever you have politicians that could care less about the severity going on in homes, in families, in children's lives, in our schools, you're looking at this type of catastrophe. It is so sad that this coronavirus is now going to bring transparency into all these matters. We was already struggling. Don't get me wrong. We was already struggling as a nation, and we was already heading down the wrong path, pretending to be in trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. Too much greed. Sacrificing on bridges and roads. Sacrificing in our nursing homes. Sacrificing in our schools. We was already heading towards a calamity. But now, since the coronavirus has come and is hit, we're just going to get there a whole lot more quicker. In other words, you're going to see something within now and the election on a level that most people could not even begin to fathom. Going through 2019 Christmas and December. They may not even have Black Friday. Has anybody ever thought of that? Come Black Friday? You may be saying, why ain't they going to have Black Friday, Dennis? People that just ain't going to have the money? No. Whenever you have large gatherings of people that's gathering in one particular building like Walmart, and the coronavirus is running rampant, do you think that the health people, the seats, the people that are in charge of these matters, do you think that they're going to promote Black Friday? Whenever you put 5 times more people under a roof that shouldn't be there to begin with, just because they're trying to get a break on a pair of jeans or a break on an electrical device. If they do have Black Friday, it'll probably be electronical Black Friday. I'm pretty sure that'd be the Black Friday, because it was discussed yesterday in a facility that I was in. But I mean, these are all things that we're going to these are hula hoops that we're going to have to go through in the next few months. People need to start thinking about it. Just like school. How you going to teach your kids how to learn digitally if they don't have a digital device to learn from? How you going to place people in places to be able to live if they're all renters and the renters is fixing to come after them towards kicking them all out? Making the homeless society that much more intense.
Partisan Problem Solvers Caucus. Well, it's good to see you, Congressman. If ever we needed a problem solved, it's now, with millions of Americans literally their futures depending on what happens. I want to ask you about one of the holdups here, which is that there's disagreement about what to do about this $600 payment. As I understand it, the disagreement within the Republican caucus is either renew that or tie tie it to what people were making before they lost their job because of coronavirus, which would be a much smaller amount of money. Where do you stand on that, Congressman?
Well, I personally believe that a percentage of your wages, that with unemployment, you shouldn't receive more than what you had before you went into unemployment status. And so I'm a believer that we can do a percentage replacement of your wages, and you would be in a position to assist families during this crisis. But at the same time, this financial disincentive of getting back to work, we're having small businesses in our district and across the country going without employees because people financially are staying on the sidelines.
Do you really think that that's a major problem, more of a problem than the number of people for whom $600 is allowing them to barely scrape by?
Well, that's why I've always advocated maybe a benefit calculation of up to $600, no more than X percent of what you were earning before you went to unemployment. That's a reasonable compensation, and it would also address the differences between New York City wages versus those in our district where in Western New York, $72,000 unemployment benefit, which this equates out to with the $600 amount, is much different in regards to city wages versus rural wages of Western New York.
As you well know, the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and Leanne just reported on this, says we won't get the text of the Senate bill until next week. What is the holdup? I mean, this is not something that snuck up on anybody. The deadlines were there. We knew it was coming. You're on the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. What can be done here? How do we get this done quickly?
I'm still very confident we are going to get this done before August 1st, thereabouts, first week of August, because it has to be done. You got the expiration of unemployment. You got kids returning to schools in areas of the country here the second week of August. So there's a lot of practical leverage that's going to force Congress to do its job. Now, I agree with you. I'm so frustrated with the political theater and the posturing and the yelling and everyone trying to get their 5 minutes of fame on national TV. We don't need that, but that's the reality of Washington, D.C. right now. But I can assure you there's many of us, especially Problem Solvers Caucus members, that are working behind the scenes to find that common ground to get this done for the American people.
Well, let me ask you if some of that common ground is some of the things that you're working on. I know you've been trying to get more money for local governments to help teachers and first responders, music to the ears of local governments. You've joined more than 40 other members of Congress in a letter calling on House leadership of both parties to prioritize support for child care providers. What movement, if any, are you seeing just on those fronts?
I'm seeing positive movement behind the scenes. I mean, this is how it gets done when you're sincere about trying to get to common ground. The conversations we've had over the last 2 weeks have really moved the needle to a positive outcome. On the issue of direct local aid in particular, that is coming in the right direction. And also the issue of child care, and that's related to school funding too. So that conversation kind of goes hand in hand. And so I'm glad to see those priorities coming forward as areas of common ground in this bill.
I also want to ask you before you go about a fellow member of your state's delegation, Democratic New York Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. And as you well know, on a floor speech Thursday, she detailed derogatory and expletive-laced comments that she says were made by Congressman Ted Yoho of Florida. He addressed the remarks but denies the expletive that she says he called her. She says these comments speak more broadly to our culture and to men's overall treatment of women. What do you make of those exchanges, Congressman?
Yeah, very disappointing. The institution needs to do better than that, and so I don't agree with my colleague using that type of language against my colleague from New York. That is not what we should be doing. We need to set the example for the country, and I agree with the silent majority of America, I believe, that says, you know what, D.C., stop acting like kids. Be responsible adults and treat each other with respect. The basic things we all learned in kindergarten that were taught by my mother, same type of culture should be here in Washington, D.C. It's just a shame at times we miss that.
Congressman Tom Reed, is your Wikipedia page correct? You're the youngest of 12 children?
I am. I got 8 older, raised by a single mom. My father passed when I was 2, and I'll just tell you, 8 sisters and 3 older brothers. That makes us a problem solver.
I have 7 brothers and 4 sisters, so as the youngest of 12 as well, I know what that means to be the problem solver of the group. Thank you so much,
Chris. We'll have to get
Congressman, and we
together.
appreciate
Thank
you taking
you.
the time.
That's the best. Thank you.
Yeah, let's hope this doesn't go on so long. It never happens. Meantime, we know that the president may have canceled the in-person part of the convention in Jacksonville, but he still wants to reopen schools. That is not sitting well with some officials and administrators, including the head of one of the nation's largest teachers unions, Randy Weingarten, who says, quote, "The president's hypocrisy knows no bounds. She will join me next." Plus, the disturbing new reporting that migrant children are still being held in detention despite that federal judge's order to release them.
Here's another cleaning tip from Mr. Clean. Cleaning tough bathroom and kitchen messes with sprays and wipes can be a struggle. There's an easier way. Try Mr. Clean Magic Erase.
There you go. The president's hypocrisy holds no bounds. Good luck to all of us. Coming from the Windmill Ministries here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 3255. Good luck to each and every one of us, and once more, shalom.